The Syrian capital has been bombed by Israel, and Israel is intervening in the internal affairs of the Syrian government. Now, this is not surprising because Israel is a genocidal pariah state which has attacked Yemen, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, now Syria, and of course is causing a genocide in Palestine. Now, we would expect the Zionists to be doing this because they will simply leap at anything that they feel is weak, and they know that they are fully supported by the Western powers. Now, like the colonials of the past, they want to sow division in other nations and they want to conquer and expand. They already have taken over parts of Syria, they have taken over Mount Hermon, they have taken over the Golan Heights since the 70s, and now they have some more nefarious plans for the southwest of Syria, Sueda in particular. Now, how is the West going to explain this out of control friend of theirs? How are they going to explain the behavior of this pariah state? So the most interesting commentary in terms of how to spin particular narratives that you'll find in this current conflict is actually Michael Clark from Sky News. Now, what's interesting is just the way that he is trying to spin the narrative in favor of the Zionists and to try and explain Israel's behavior in a way that is supposed to be, for the viewers, to be something rational. But clearly we can see the narrative falls apart when you start nipping away at the actual details which he misses out. Let's have a watch on Sky News on what he actually says about this.
What is going on here? Because this is a conflict now between Israel and Syria's military. Is that right?
That's what it's become, Darren. I mean, it started some time ago, some days ago, in the fragmented area of southwestern Syria in clashes between some minority Druze militia elements and some of the Bedouin peoples who also inhabit that area. The Bedouin are Sunni and the Druze are an offshoot of Shia Islam, 10th century offshoot, not the same, but different enough. And there were some local clashes. The Syrian army then came in a sense, to peacekeep, but actually on behalf of the Bedouin groups, and began to attack the Druze minorities.
That's the first lie in this interview. He is claiming that the Syrian army came in to attack the Druze. That is a patent lie. The first thing to keep in mind is that the new Syrian government has actually incorporated minorities. It's actually taken them into consideration. It's given them a degree of autonomy. It has actually allowed for a type of cohesion in the post-war Syria. So what we need to understand is he is simply trying to paint a picture as if the Syrian army came in to attack these helpless Druze, and that's why Israel is getting involved. That's a lie. The Druze minority in Syria actually has a lot of rights, and there is a militia group from the Druze themselves which is in conflict with a Bedouin Sunni group, and the Syrian army came in to peacekeep, and they were actually killed, and a lot of them died. So he's missed out those details because at the end of the day, he is also, just like the Zionists, he has a colonial mindset, and he will look at things from a purely expansionist point of view, from the perspective of power, because for them, you know, he needs to address, if he was a rational strategic analyst, the first thing he should actually do is address, why is Israel overextending? Why is Israel actually going beyond its border? Why is it attacking a sovereign nation? Why is it going ahead and interfering in the affairs of another state? That is the right question an international relations scholar should be asking. They should be asking these questions rather than trying to justify the actions of this state. And this just goes to show you the power of propaganda and missing out these details.
And because of that, Israel has now come in and is attacking Syrian forces to protect the Druze. Now, the Druze are a minority of about 500,000 people in southwestern Syria. There's about another 500,000 in Lebanon and Israel. And just about an hour ago, the statement that Benjamin Netanyahu made that you just quoted, he began by saying, "My fellow Druze citizens of Israel, you know, we are protecting your people over the border, but please don't go over the border yourself. Leave this to us." And so what began as an intercommunal problem between two relatively small militia groups in two minority communities has now become a clash between Israeli forces and Syrian forces. And the Israelis are attacking as far right to the west of Damascus and have launched hundreds of airstrikes in recent weeks and have...
Okay, so something that he is parroting is that the Israeli government is there to protect the Druze. He should know better than to push out a lie which is very easy to dismantle. If Israel cared about protecting people, it wouldn't be committing a genocide in Palestine. It wouldn't have actually killed the Lebanese civilians, the Iranian civilians, the Yemeni civilians, the Iraqi civilians. It wouldn't have interfered over decades in all these different countries and killed so many people. So this idea that he's just lapped onto, which is Israel is there to defend. And also what's interesting is he is admitting that people are going across the border, and he is repeating the lies of Netanyahu when he says that the Druze should stay here, we are there to protect them across the border. How is it possible for Druze men to travel from Israel into Syria? That's a heavily fortified border. That is a place that they have the technology to snipe people, to drone people, to kill people that come near the border. But you can see it's a porous border. The Israelis are just standing there and letting the Druze go into Syria. And when they're going to go into Syria, they're basically going to increase the sectarian tensions that are there. So when Netanyahu says, my fellow Druze citizens should stay in Israel and let Israel do its job, he is saying that in a way to appease the public opinion of the international community, to make it look like he is a peacekeeper, when in fact he knows at any given moment he can stop the people crossing the border, because that's very easy for them to do. But what he wants to do is he wants to have a level of plausible deniability. So, oh, I didn't know these people are going to be going across the border. I mean, it's not in my control, but clearly they're all working together. And obviously Israel is going to be providing military support to the Druze as well, because Israel wants to expand, and this is one of the fault lines that is going to try and take advantage of.
And have increased those airstrikes in that particular area. So this has become a serious situation which began as a peacekeeping problem between two relatively small groups of militias from two of the minority groups in southwestern Syria.
Okay, so at least you now admit that it was supposed to be a peace-giving mission. Previously you said, well, they were there, it wasn't really peacekeeping, it was there because the Druze were basically getting attacked by the Syrian government. Now, it's not in the interest of the Syrian government to attack the Druze, because that's simply going to ignite these fault lines. And in fact, the Syrian government has vowed to protect the Druze and protect the Alawites and protect the Christians and protect the minorities. You know these things, right? You actually know these things, but you deliberately want to spin things in the favor of the Zionists.
And Michael, also we're hearing in the last couple of minutes a bit more breaking news, this from the Syrian state news agency reporting that Israel are also striking targets in Damascus as well, the Syrian capital.
Okay, so let's see his reaction here. Now we're talking about Israel bombing the capital of Syria, which has nothing to do, there's not like there's you can't even claim this propaganda story that there's Druze being killed in Damascus, because that's, even the Israelis are not claiming that, but they're bombing the capital. So let's see what Clark has to say, this supposed neutral international relations scholar.
So we believe it may well be the Syrian military headquarters. Again, a continued sense of escalation here?
Yes, there were some strikes this morning at the entrance of the Syrian Ministry of Defence in western Damascus, and I think this may be a second set of strikes. I haven't seen the details that you're looking at, but that's certainly what it sounds like. I mean, the point here, Darren, is that Israel has made it very clear that they regard southwestern Syria now as a demilitarised zone. So one thing, I mean, they've occupied Mount Hermon, which is a very important strategic point because it overlooks Damascus. And they've taken Mount Hermon, which is in Syrian territory. They moved into the UN-monitored buffer zone on the eastern strip of the Golan Heights. So they've already moved out of the Golan Heights, which originally, of course, was Syrian territory until 1967. So they've moved out there. And they're operating as far south as Deraa, right in the south. And the Israelis have made it clear that they regard this, and Netanyahu keeps using this phrase, a demilitarized zone.
Okay, so you're casually describing Israel's expansionist policy in Syria. They have taken over the Golan Heights and they've gone beyond that area to extend their reach. They've actually taken over new territory, Mount Hermon, as you pointed out, and they're also operating as far as Daraa. So what is going on? At what point are you going to say, this doesn't make sense, this is irrational, this is not the way a state is supposed to behave? Instead, you're being just purely descriptive. This is what the Zionists are doing. This is what Israel is doing. This is what's basically going on. At what point are you going to, as a supposed academic, say, this is not the way a normal state behaves. This is not the way that we would expect Russia to be behaving with Poland or with any of its neighbors, or the United States and Mexico. No, nothing like that has been uttered by yourself. You haven't condemned Israel's expansionist policy. You haven't spoken about how alien this is to the behavior of respectable states. It just goes to show that Sky News is simply a Zionist outlet, and they try and pretend to be neutral, but it's laughable.
And Israel Katz, the Israeli defense minister, said a couple of hours ago, he said that the regime, doesn't call them the government in Syria, the regime in Syria must vacate this area. We're talking about Syria here. They must vacate this area. If they don't get the message, we'll have to take more measures. And so there is Israel sitting inside Syria, telling the Syrian government to vacate its own territory.
Okay, so that's fine. You've described what Israel is doing. Can you just say this is not normal? It's not normal for, say, Mexico to tell America how it should be behaving in San Francisco. This is not normal. And I can see you have realized what the situation is. But at what point are you going to say this is not the way that diplomatic countries should be acting? This is not the way you're supposed to be acting with your neighbors. But you're going to be silent on that, aren't you? Because you're a Zionist shill.
How difficult it is. And the reason that the Israelis are doing that is that they demand the idea of having a demilitarized zone because they say they will not have an Islamist government right up against their border. That's their thinking. And they're taking a very aggressive attitude towards that at the moment. But they are, as it were, using the problem that the Druze community now have as a reason to go in to protect the Druze and establish the fact that Damascus must not operate in what they now decide is a demilitarized zone.
Lovely. So in that description, which is quite accurate, you fail to mention, well, why should Syria expect this behavior, and why should Syria accept this behavior in any way, shape or form? This is not normal. What you should actually be doing as a supposed academic is actually saying why something like this would backfire, why no one would respect Israel even amongst its friends. And the other thing which is interesting is you are parroting the Zionist narrative while pretending to be neutral, but you cannot bring yourself even to that facade that you want to portray of neutrality by simply saying, this is odd, this is odd, this is not the way a state is actually supposed to behave. So where are we headed? What we know about Israel is that Israel has an expansionist policy, is going to continue to intervene in Syria, is going to continue to actually ignite sectarian divisions, is possibly going to use the Druze minority within its own borders to create destabilization in Syria. And what we also must have realized from this particular conflict is those people who believe in this supposed idea that the new Syrian government is somehow some sort of Zionist puppet, and I've seen this sort of conspiracy theory being pushed online. Well, how does that make any sense? How does that make sense now that Israel is attacking Syrian territory, killing Syrian troops, bombing the actual capital, and this was, I believe, the defense ministry? How would you explain this being a Zionist puppet? The revolution which took place in Syria was something good for the people. The people stood up and took out their leader, who was put there by force. And he was unpopular, he was hated, he committed massacres, and his cowardice really showed right near the end when he ran away to Russia. So what we have right now is a situation where the new government, which is fragile, cannot basically defend itself because it doesn't have the weaponry, it doesn't have the air defenses, it doesn't have the ability to do any of these things. So we're in a very sad situation in Syria at the moment, and Syria is going to be turning towards its allies, towards Saudi Arabia, towards many of the neighboring Muslim countries, including Turkey, which has been very supportive of it, and it's going to be looking towards them for some sort of diplomatic solution because it doesn't have the military ability to defend itself. So I hope in this video you've learned the power of propaganda, the power of, pushing forward these supposed experts and academics, but in reality they're just charlatans and they're just shills. And to really understand what's going on, you have to look at the details. That's where the devil is. And once you know the details, you start to understand the Zionist expansionist plan and what they want to do in terms of their vision for a new Middle East.